Hello, I'm Claire Jewitt, and this is the Diary of an Orange Cat. The diary entries of a thoughtful, slightly neurotic ginger cat named Weasley, written from a small harbour community in New Zealand. Last time, things got a little out of hand during a neighbourhood catfight. In this episode, Weasley finds himself in the spotlight, and then in something far more dangerous: catnip. And now, Weasley's diary. Before continuing with my diary entries, I must tell you that this episode contains a period in my life when I was horrified because I had attracted media attention. At the time, I didn't feel very comfortable about it at all, but I'm a bit more used to it nowadays. This episode contains the consequences of this exposure and an encounter with a most peculiar plant. Thursday, 22nd of November, 2018. I couldn't believe my eyes. Right in the middle of the local newspaper was my picture, along with a photograph of Mummy underneath. Had the media been alerted to rumours of an aggressive ginger brute living in the village, whose name was now linked to acts of mindless violence, a psychotic maniac who'd already put one person in hospital? This was ominous news, and my first instinct was to run. But first I needed a plan. I needed to think. I needed Mummy's dressing gown. Mummy's dressing gown is made of this super soft fleecy stuff that feels delicious when I knead it with my paws. It just sends me into a sort of trance. I prefer Mummy to be wearing it, but this was unlikely in the middle of the afternoon when she was working at a computer, so I was disappointed yet unsurprised to find it hanging up in the bathroom out of my reach. Dejected and anxious, I went underneath the house and shook for a short while. I certainly didn't want to be seen by anyone and risk being recognised. I was lost in gloomy thoughts of living a homeless life of desperation on the streets when Ron sauntered up with a mouse between his teeth. With a victorious grin, he dropped it at my feet. Normally I would have pointed out that this was undoubtedly the same mouse I'd caught a couple of days ago, but instead I related the story about seeing my picture in the local newspaper. Ron didn't appear at all fazed by this. In fact, he seemed to be quite pleased to be gaining a level of notoriety by association, and exclaimed with great delight, "You've been papped! Before you know it, the paparazzi be crawling all over this town with long-range lenses, demanding huge money for photos of us all lying in the sun and eating and cleaning and stuff." I sighed miserably, not knowing how to respond, given that I'd understood very little of what Ron had just said. Yet his breathless excitement made me consider the possibility that this might not be a bad thing after all. We went down to the ditch and pretended to be lions. Although playing our favourite game took my mind off the potentially damaging newspaper article, I still felt anxious. But it was far better than spending the afternoon trembling under their house surrounded by dead rodents. I was going through my stalk and pounce routine when I realised that Ron had wandered off and was sniffing at a plant growing nearby. He seemed fully entranced by its smell and began rolling on the ground, pawing at it, licking it and chewing it. I watched in alarm as he leapt about, purring loudly before shaking his head and laughing hysterically. I approached with caution, unsure if this was part of our lion game or if he might be having some sort of seizure. Then the heady fragrance reached my nostrils, and before long I too was consumed by this amazing plant that seemed to banish all my fears and inhibitions. I don't know how long Ron and I wallowed in this blissfully intoxicating nirvana. It might have been 5 minutes, it might have been 5 hours, before we were interrupted by the arrival of a pretty little grey cat not long out of her kittenhood. She seemed strangely familiar, although I'm fairly certain I hadn't met her before. Her eyes widened at the sight of me, and she shouted, "I know who you are. I've read all about you in the Peninsula Post. You're Weasley, and I know all about how you've been such a comfort and help to your owner who's got multiple sclerosis." Unsure of how to act cool around this situation, I simply said, "Have I?" I was lying on my back with my legs akimbo in the middle of this magic plant, but I didn't want to stand up because I wasn't entirely certain that my legs were attached to my body. Feeling the need to say something, I blurted out, "You have not lived until you've done something for someone who can never repay you." She seemed to accept this somewhat bizarre statement and said, "Do you think so? I'd love to discuss this more with you sometime. Did you know that the plant that you're sitting in is Nepeta cataria? You should probably move away from it." Ron and I both looked at her blankly. For a horrible moment I thought Ron was going to start drooling. Someone needed to speak, so I blurted out the first thing that came into my head. "Knowing when to walk away is wisdom. Being able to is courage. Walking away with grace, with your head held high, is dignity." Where was I getting all these corny quotations from? I could scarcely walk, let alone with any sort of dignity. The newcomer seemed unperturbed by this nonsensical assertion and carried on knowledgeably. "It's a species of the genus Nepeta in the family Lamiaceae. My owners taught me all about it. Commonly known as catnip, catswort or catmint, it's often used as a recreational substance for the enjoyment of domestic cats, but its behavioural effects extend to leopards, cougars, servals and even lynxes." "What about lions?" said Ron, suddenly finding his voice, and with that he gave a roar that sounded more like a rather pathetic high-pitched meow. We both giggled stupidly. "Studies have shown that lions and tigers can react strongly, but not as consistently," she said, before her voice trailed away, leaving an uncomfortable silence. Nodding sagely, I filled the awkward void with, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds," not knowing what this had to do with anything. I needed to pull myself together. Then, wobbling slightly, I chanced standing upright and ended up in a heap back in the catnip. Ron remained motionless and rather ambitiously was attempting to sing Stairway to Heaven. "There's a muffle in your hedgehog, don't be a lawman." I could see her ears twitch and flatten as if Ron attempted a high note. "I need to get some help to pull you both out," she said as she turned to leave. "By the way, my name is Serafina Peccola." "Enchantée, Serafina," I said. OK, so the French touch was a bit cheesy, but at least I'd kept a lid on the quotations. Her eyes narrowed as she said, "Oh, it's one word, Serafina, like the witch queen from Finland." Then she left us both clutching our sides, laughing in the catnip. "It's Serafina," mimicked Ron in a high-pitched voice. "No wonder she's named after a witch queen. She's a nightmare." Well, I rather liked her, but I didn't expect to see her again, as I was almost certain she'd overheard Ron's last remark. With enormous effort, Ron and I made it back to my house and were surprised to find Serafina there with Squeak of all people. At least I think it was Squeak. He was looking extremely dapper, and his black and white coat shone. He looked as though he was wearing a tuxedo. I whispered this to Ron, and we both thought it was so funny that we made little snorty noises out of our noses. I felt terrible about this, but Squeak was taking everything so seriously that I just couldn't look at him in the eye without dissolving into giggles. My cheek muscles ached from laughing, and then I remembered something. Mummy had bought me one of those appalling lion hat things that you put on cats. I'd been far too ashamed to mention anything about it before, but now seemed like the perfect time to bring it out. Ron and I took turns at putting the lion hat on. Both of us literally honked with laughter until our throats hurt. Squeak didn't want to spoil his hair by trying it on, and Serafina just looked at it and sniffed haughtily. "I don't know why you think the lion is the king of the jungle," she hissed. "Didn't you know that it's the lioness that does all the hunting and provides the males with their food?" "OK, so why don't you nip up Hunter's Road and bring us back a zebra for dinner?" replied Ron sarcastically. "I'm starving." I realised that I too had suddenly become extraordinarily hungry and started honking with laughter again. Even Squeak began to laugh, but stopped himself abruptly. I laughed about that for far too long while everyone was talking about other things. I couldn't help running mental replays of Squeak in his tuxedo tucking into a zebra, at Ron in the lion hat, and at me firing out all those cliches to Serafina. Before long, I found myself smiling stupidly and softly snorting at random intervals. Later in the evening, when everyone had gone home, a terrible feeling of shame came over me. I'd embarrassed myself in front of my friends and I needed to put things right. Perhaps an online blanket apology to let everyone know how sorry I was. Mummy was watching television and had left her laptop open on the Facebook community page. I saw my opportunity and I took it. I'm really pleased with how I shrewdly managed to cover all the bases while ensuring that no one bears any long-term grudges after my ingenious post. 787 YF IFDGY. Oh God, my paws don't seem to fit on it. That was another entry from the Diary of an Orange Cat. Next time, Weasley's world becomes just a little bit more organised with the arrival of Seraphina's latest initiative. There are committees, there are campaigns, and there's something called Spunk, the Society for the Prevention of Unneutered Cats.